This is the third episode in our season covering homicide cases across the United States. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the interviewee's own. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This episode discusses substance use, violence, hate crimes, homophobia, transphobia, homicide, crime scenes, and autopsy. Listener discretion is advised. This series contains discussion of intimate partner violence. If you are in need of resources, please reach out to 800-799-SAFE or 7233 or thehotline.org. This is The Fall Line. This episode, we're bringing you another story from Dallas. And without the family of Armani Dante Morgan, we wouldn't have been able to cover the case of Katrina Mowry that we told you over the last few weeks. His aunt, Robin Johnson, introduced us to Katrina Marshall, who you heard from over the last two episodes, as she told us her aunt's story. Robin met Katrina because they have something in common. They're both fighting for their lost loved ones. In March of 2025, I met Robin Johnson at AdvocacyCon. It's a conference designed to bring together victims' advocates, family members, experts, researchers, and content creators. I was there with Anne-Marie Morovic, the sister of Susan Lund. She's the woman formerly known as Ina Jane Doe, and we were in Indiana to talk about missing persons and unidentified persons, and how to better bridge the knowledge gap for families. I saw a photo of Robin's 27-year-old nephew, Armani, displayed on a memorial slideshow, and I recognized him because my colleague, Haley Gray, has been working as an advocate in his case. I knew that Armani had disappeared in June of 2017, and his remains had been discovered just weeks later, near his home in Dallas. There had been no movement in his case. Later that day, I met his Aunt Robin. We exchanged phone numbers and emails, and by the time I got back to Atlanta, she'd sent me everything she had on Armani's case. Timelines, notes, official documentation. Like Katrina Marshall, whose work you learned about last episode, Robin has put in hundreds of hours of research and advocacy efforts into her loved one's case. Robin told me that she's been advocating for Armani for a long time, since he was a child. Her sister, Armani's mother, had worked long hours, and Robin had stepped in when needed to make sure he attended school and had family to come home to when class let out for the day. When he'd needed her, she'd been there. It was how their family had always worked. They'd been taught to stick together. And that did not stop after Armani's death in 2017. Since then, his Aunt Robin has been the central advocate in his case. Armani Morgan, a Dallas native, grew up in the care of a close network of relatives. His mother, his uncles and his aunts, and his grandmother and grandfather. His father was not in Armani's life, something Robin said he felt the lack of. But his grandfather was there and served as a central male role model during his childhood. They were the kind of family who were generationally known by teachers and coaches and principals at the schools that they all attended, and they were involved in just about everything. Armani was known for his love of fashion and his independent spirit. Robin told us that they supported that. If it made Armani happy, then they were happy. He'd come out to them as gay while he was a young adult, and they said that they were glad he was comfortable enough to be open with them. Armani had a magnetic personality, and people tended to flock around him. Maybe some of that developed when he was younger. He had to be brave because Armani was not willing to make himself smaller to fit into other people's perceptions of what he should be. Armani was expansive in his fashion expression. For instance, he loved wigs and makeup and purses. To our knowledge, he also used masculine pronouns, and he told his family and friends that he identified as a gay man. His family said Armani was popular, but he also faced some rejection and some bullying, and had issues with substance use in his early adult life. He sometimes found himself in dangerous situations, especially when he was not willing to go along with what others wanted him to do. His Aunt Robin told us that the thing to really know about Armani is that he loved hard and deeply, and that he wanted to be loved in return. Sometimes that meant that he formed strong connections that nurtured him, and other times it meant that he sought out acceptance from people who didn't have his best interest in mind. Armani lived in Oak Cliff in South Dallas. According to the Texas Historical Society, it's a sprawling area with its own divisions that was once a separate city that sat across the Trinity River. Now it's been absorbed into Dallas proper. Oak Cliff makes up a large swath of the city. According to U.S. News, it's approximately the same size as Seattle, and it's home to more than 300,000 people. Oak Cliff is the same area of Dallas where Katrina Mowry's body was discovered back in 1985. It was the manager of the Oak Cliff Apartments who'd first alerted police to the car parked in the alley behind the complex. More than 30 years later, the remains of Armani Dante Morgan would be discovered a few miles away in an overgrown lot alongside a residential street near Bushman Park. In June of 2017, Armani Morgan was living in East Oak Cliff with his mother at an apartment complex not far from his Aunt Robin and her daughters. He'd lived in that area for a long time, and he'd known many of the young people in the neighborhood since they were in elementary school. That had its benefits, and it had its drawbacks. He'd been able to form tight bonds, but his aunt told us he'd also gotten into trouble with some of the same people multiple times over the years. Armani had a nonviolent criminal record, all for charges relating to theft, and that is not something his family has ever downplayed. They were all focused on Armani's talents, like his ability to do hair, and they encouraged him to stay away from the people who they felt drew him back into old patterns. And those were mostly people who'd lived in the immediate area for a long time. In his younger years, it had been a few other boys he'd gone to school with. As a young adult, Robin said, it was a woman and two men, one of whom Armani was involved with romantically. The other two, she told us, were people she terms associates and not friends. Armani's real friends were often family, most of all Robin's youngest daughter, Deshay. They'd grown up as close as siblings, and they told each other everything. She was the person the family turned to when Armani disappeared in June of 2017, because she knew him best. Deshay had been there to celebrate her cousin's achievements and support him through his struggles, too. She knew there had been violence in his relationship, and that he wanted to end things with his boyfriend. That boyfriend had kept his romantic involvement with Armani secret, and according to the family, in the last months of Armani's life, he'd escalated to emotionally and physically abusing Armani. And that was not the only threat that Armani was facing. Armani had gotten into a situation with a former neighbor, a dangerous involvement that his family said he couldn't extract himself from. Allegedly, he was helping this individual trade some of her SNAP benefits for money, which could in turn be used to purchase drugs. According to his Aunt Robin, there were a total of 3 people who were involved in the process: Armani, the former neighbor we mentioned before, and a man, an alleged drug dealer. Allegedly, the 3 worked together to exchange the use of the woman's EBT card for cash, which could then, as we said, be used to purchase drugs. Armani's role was apparently a social one. He knew a lot of people in the area. His family's understanding is that he made the connections that converted benefits into cash. But from what Robin has been told, something went wrong along the way. And on one occasion in the late spring of 2017, when Armani failed to deliver cash to the other parties involved, it's alleged that the threats began, and eventually, there were more than threats. Robin told us that Armani was assaulted twice in late May of 2017, and then, on June 3rd, he disappeared. Although, perhaps, not without a trace. A few locals came forward to the family to report that they'd seen Armani being attacked that same day, though they were unwilling to speak with Dallas police. Armani was missing for weeks, without an official investigation underway. According to Robin, that wasn't for lack of trying. On July 24th, 2017, on a residential street not far from Armani's home, a dog was seen carrying what appeared to be a human skull. A Good Samaritan called Dallas police, and eventually, scattered human remains and a few personal effects were found in an area off the road. The victim was identified as Armani Morgan, and, Robin told us, a case was finally opened. Despite evidence indicating a pattern of violent attacks preceding his disappearance and death, Armani's manner of death has not been ruled a homicide. It remains undetermined, as does the cause of death. Manner and cause have different meanings in death investigations. Manner is one of the major categories a death can fall into, such as homicide, natural, accident, suicide, or undetermined. And cause refers to the specific action, injury, or disease that resulted in an individual's death. For instance, drowning, or pneumonia, or cardiac arrest. Manner and cause of death are determinations made based on the sum total of evidence gathered in a case. This can be at a scene, through autopsy and toxicology, forensic testing, and even witness interviews. In 2025, Dallas Police Department told NBC5 that despite the undetermined cause and manner of death in Armani's case, quote, the case has been investigated as a homicide. It's been 8 long years since that investigation began. Armani's family is hopeful that much more can be done, and that classifying his death as a homicide will open avenues for forensic testing and funding that has so far not been available. They believe that could help identify individuals who may have been responsible for Armani's death. Armani's case, on its own, hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the media. Not until this year. There was some coverage back in the summer of 2019, 2 years after Armani died, but his family said that his death was inaccurately grouped in with other open homicide investigations that Dallas was facing at the time. There's no known connection between Armani and the other victims who were reported on that summer. As we told you before the break, there's been some confusion regarding the initial reporting in Armani's case and how he was discussed back in 2019. Armani Morgan was killed in 2017, but his case was brought to the media's attention 2 full years later, in connection with the murders that occurred in Dallas in the spring and summer of 2019. All homicides are of concern to the public, especially when their perpetrators remain at large. In these cases, there was also concern that a particular demographic of residents might have been targeted in possible hate crimes: Black transgender women. When Armani's remains were recovered in July of 2017, items, including his purse, were found at the scene. In media discussion, his case was then linked, 2 years later, to the homicides that we just mentioned. But Armani had not had coverage of his own, or been discussed in conjunction with other Dallas homicide cases until that point. And based on the sum total of facts in his case, there was no connection between Armani and the 2019 homicides. According to the Dallas Morning News, 2 Black trans women, Chanel Lindsay and Malaysia Booker, were murdered in separate instances in Dallas. A third woman, who was not identified in the press, was stabbed but survived. Malaysia Booker and Chanel Lindsay were killed within weeks of each other, and public speculation suggested the cases might be linked, though Dallas Police Department did not officially take that stance. Eventually, separate men were charged and convicted in their murders. Per the Morning News, Malaysia Booker's killer, Kendra LeVar Lyle, pleaded guilty in 2023 and was sentenced to 48 years in prison. And according to the Dallas Voice, Chanel Lindsay's killer was identified as Ruben Alvarado. He was convicted by a jury of first-degree murder in 2021 and sentenced to 37 years in prison. Armani had never entered the media spotlight, and this connection to Ms. Booker and Ms. Lindsay did not further the investigation into his case. It's only been since 2023, via coverage from a local Dallas reporter, that facts about Armani's life have reached the public. And in recent months, through a series of billboards, petitions, and social media campaigns, his family has finally begun to attract a wider audience, which is vital, but it's not nearly enough. There has been no one charged in Armani's death, so we cannot say for certain what connection he may have had with those responsible. However, he was embroiled in 2 frightening situations in his own neighborhood with people that he did know well, and those are people who his family are most concerned with. Armani's family believes that either conflict could have led to his disappearance and ultimately his death. Armani's case must be examined separately and thoroughly. That's why his family has been trying to gain separate, individual, and sustained media attention since 2017. And they also have a clear call to action, one they'll need your support for, that you'll hear more about at the end of these episodes. First, though, we want to tell you more about Armani, and Robin too. Their lives are intertwined because Robin helped to raise Armani. She and Armani's mother worked together to make sure that their children always had a safe, structured home life. Robin told us it's how they were raised, and it's what they wanted their own kids to experience.
Armani's mom is the second oldest, and I'm next to the youngest. The oldest male in the family, he's 5 years older than Armani's mom. And then Armani's mom is 5.5, almost 6 years older than myself. But it's a brother in between Armani's mom and myself. There's another sibling. She's 4.5, almost 5 years younger than me.
Were y'all particularly close when you were growing up?
Yes. Yes, extremely close, all in the same house, on top of each other, you might as well say. 4 girls and 2 boys. As kids, we were into sports, even starting as early as elementary school. We started out on the track team. All of us did. All 6 of the siblings. That was just something that we all gravitated to because we would, on the weekend in our spare time, we would get out and race each other up and down the street to see who was the fastest amongst the siblings. In middle school, I played basketball, and then everyone else kind of gravitated to like the government club, and then there was some chess clubs. And on the weekends, too, we would take camping trips with the school. So we all stayed pretty busy, and we all finished high school in the Oak Cliff area, all 6 of us. The sibling that's a year and a half older than myself, she had a daughter. And I raised her daughter along with my 2 children and Armani as well. When anybody would see me out with my 2 children, Armani and my niece, everybody just assumed that these were all my children because they were always with me. His mom worked in the home health field, and so she would have to get up early to catch the bus. And so she would leave home around 5, no later than 5:30 every morning. And Armani didn't have to be at school until 8. And so, that left him to be a latchkey kid. But majority of the time, he would be with me and my 2 girls.
Because she spent so much time with Armani, Robin said that she knew him as well as she did her own children.
Music was his thing. He loved music. He would sit and listen to music, but when we would have family functions or, get-togethers, he would always be dancing, always. He was more into gospel music because we all, went to church, and then he loved jazz. He also loved jazz music as well. He brought, joy to our lives, always singing and dancing, and he just didn't want anybody around him to be sad at all, no matter what was going on. In elementary, he seemed to thrive in kindergarten, and that was during a time when we would all, peep into the classroom and check in on him because one thing about it, we all attended the same elementary school, including Armani's mom. Armani and my 2 children, everybody attended the same elementary school, which was just literally maybe 15 to 20 steps down the street from the childhood home to where Armani's mom and I grew up. And Armani knew that education was important in the family because, that's how we were all raised, because we were taught at an early age, education is going to take you further than anything in your life. And you're going to need that education in order for you to leave home, get a job, and be able to take care of yourself.
That was important to Armani's grandparents. He spent a lot of time with them, too. Robin said he was especially close to his grandfather, who mentored Armani and made sure to teach him as much as he could. Armani didn't have a relationship with his biological father, which was something Robin said he'd always wanted. But his grandfather stepped in to make sure that Armani had the guidance and support that he'd need.
So your dad really was like
The only father figure in Armani's life until my dad passed away in 1999.
Yes. How old was Armani when your dad passed away?
Armani was 9.5, almost 10. He took it hard.
Looking back, Robin marks her father's death as one of the major turning points in Armani's life. Up until then, they'd had no issues with Armani in school. But, she said, the next year, things shifted. It was probably a combination of factors: growing up, grief, and Armani looking for acceptance. But they started to have trouble.
When he was in 6th grade, he started to hang with some of the young fellas that also lived in the same apartment complex as Armani and his mom. And we got wind because everybody knew everybody within the area. And I say, well, I noticed that your nephew decided he wanted to try to skip school yesterday. I said, oh, okay. And, that's when I got wind of that part of it.
Like Robin said, her family had always taken education seriously. So she decided to do something about it.
And I was just like, no. And little did he know, when he walked into the classroom and started seeing me, he was just too embarrassed. Priceless. It was priceless. And prior to me just going to sit in on the classes, I checked to make sure it was okay with the teachers, and I let them know why I was there. And they said, well, we appreciate it. We just wish more family members would do the same. And I said, well, because his mom, she works in the home health field and she has to leave home so early. She just really doesn't have the time and the flexibility to be able to check in on him the way that I am. And so, they appreciated it. And once I continued to show up, he's got it together and started attending classes.
Did he ever talk about what he wanted to do?
Well, he did. He loved fashion and he loved doing hair. That was a skill set of his. He would used to want to dress his mom. He would buy things for her and tell her, well, why don't you wear this? And she said, well, how you know I like this? He said, well, it look good on you. So that was just something that he gravitated to. And I believe he picked that up in the home economics class in middle school. Because at one point they would do the sewing portion of the class, and then at one point they would do the cooking portion of the class. So he learned a lot from that home economics class.
It reached a point, though, where Robin and Armani's mother could no longer convince him to attend class, even though he loved certain aspects of it, like home economics. Some of it came down to outside influence, and some of it came down to how he was treated in school. Robin said that Armani began to skip before he was legally allowed to leave high school, and that landed him in trouble.
He really stopped going a lot in 9th grade, yes. Because 7th and 8th grade, I was in the classrooms on top of him. And then 9th grade is when the children all went to the same high school together. And so when he got amongst that crowd is just when he just decided he wasn't going to go to school at all. And that's when he landed in this boys group home setting. And he had to stay there, all day, all night. What would happen is that myself and my youngest daughter and his mom will visit him on the weekend and have lunch and sit in the meetings to see what all he had going on and activities he would be in. And he would beg us all, I'm going to do better. I was, yeah, but the program lasts for a certain period of time and you're going to finish it. You are going to finish it. But one thing about Armani, he would try to mimic and do what he would see the other children in the apartment complex do, because he knew at some point that one of us was going to put a stop to him trying to do everything that he was seeing everybody else do. Because he couldn't stay out and hang out as late as the other children, and they would all make fun of him. Oh, you got to go in the house early. Trying to be accepted. And that was part of Armani's downfall, because he didn't have his dad in his life. He was always trying to be accepted by other people that were outside of his family.
Robin told us that acceptance within the family had never been an issue, whether it came to Armani's style or who he dated. But that didn't necessarily mean that people in the outside world would always view him in the same way. And he would sometimes seek out crowds who were the most accepting, even if that meant people who were engaging in illegal activities. That led to Armani's involvement in some of those activities, and with people who didn't treat him well. Robin told us they discovered that the man Armani was dating was allegedly in a long-term relationship with a woman and was not comfortable seeing Armani in an open way. It was Armani's first serious relationship, and they wished he didn't have to keep it a secret. That was one issue. Another was the way this boyfriend made money.
He was a low-level drug dealer in the area. And the fact that this guy hid his same-sex relationship from his immediate family and the live-in girlfriend that he was with, I don't know if the mystique of it, mysteriousness of it is what kept Armani in it so long. But, once this male began to get physically violent, with Armani told him, said, no, this is not for me. The fact that you want to start to be violent toward me. And then once Armani decided he no longer wanted to be in that intimate relationship with this male perpetrator is when he really became increasingly violent with Armani.
Do you know how long into their relationship he started being violent with Armani?
It had to be the 2.5, almost 3-year mark.
Robin said that Armani wasn't open about the violence. He only told his cousin, whom he swore to secrecy. It's something that she didn't share fully until after Armani disappeared.
She would tell us about the different times that she had to take him to the hospital to seek emergency treatment because the same-sex partner Armani had pistol whipped him and put a big gash over his right eye, and he had to get stitches. And not only that, one other time it was just a physical fist fight to where he had Armani bruised and bleeding. And this is why Armani and my youngest daughter had such a close relationship, because she would keep his secrets. She just wanted to make sure that he was okay in every aspect, wanted to take care of him no matter what was going on with him. She was his protector. Anytime things would go awry for him, or he would be in certain places and he no longer wanted to be there, he would always call her and ask her if she could come and get him. And she would, no matter where he was. And this was before she even learned to drive. Even after she learned to drive, it was even more so, of the same thing. Can you come and get me? Or I'm somewhere I don't want to be. Can you get somebody to bring you to come and get me? And she would. And she has that guilt, and I told her, I said, well, I hope that you would soon release that, because even sometime when she would go in and get him out of situations or go and pick him up, when he would call her and she would bring him home and he would stay home for a couple of days, retreat inside home, he would always stay home. When he would get himself or find himself in situations that he didn't want to be in, he would stay home for days. And then he would venture back out. And then she would always ask, well, where you going now? Well, why you can't stay home a few more days?
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
The intimate partner violence that existed between Armani and his boyfriend was something that his cousin worried about. That and the boyfriend's alleged connections to the drug trade in Dallas. When Armani disappeared, it was one of the scenarios that she considered, but it wasn't the only one. As we told you at the beginning of the episode, Armani had become involved with two people who lived in the area, a woman and a separate man who was allegedly another low-level drug dealer, who were interested in exchanging SNAP benefits for cash. The cash was then to be used to make drug purchases. Robin said that Armani's family wasn't aware of this until things began to go wrong. They discovered that his primary role had been to connect people who'd be interested in trading cash for use of the benefits.
She knew that Armani knew a lot of people, and a lot of people loved being around Armani. It was just his personality. And she used him because he knew a lot of people. and it wouldn't be hard for him to be able to sell a portion of her food stamps every month in exchange for cash in order for him to use those funds to purchase drugs to consume together. And she used to live in the same apartment complex with Armani and his mom for several years before she moved away. And that's how he came to become acquainted with her. They all knew one another from the general area, and Armani knew him as well. And, as I continue to say, they all knew one another very well. These people were not strangers to Armani. They couldn't control Armani. He had his own mind, and when he didn't want to do something, he would let you know he didn't want to do it. And by him being associated with them for so long, and they would all do similar things together all the time, when it was something that he didn't want to do, they would become upset because he wasn't always a follower.
Robin's understanding of the issue that arose is that the three had a disagreement over $400. The woman claimed Armani had stolen it from her and got the male associate involved in trying to retrieve that money from Armani. Robin said that this woman also enlisted a number of teenagers in the harassment as well.
She started relentlessly pursuing him. The first time she sought him out and was tracking him like an animal was the week of May the 22nd of 2017. She would always have someone aiding her in doing it.
Robin said that on that date, the female approached Armani in public and, with the help of two teenage males, attacked him.
They knocked him down in a pile of ants. He was swollen from the ant bites to where they were continuously knocking him to the ground, and the ants got the best of him doing that. Of course, he had some bruises and had a bloody mouth. It was always close to home when she would catch up to him.
That was only the first attack. Within a week, there was another. A bullet would be fired through the window of Armani's home. But no witnesses were willing to speak up, and 2 weeks later, Armani was gone. Next time on The Fall Line, we continue the story of Armani Dante Morgan. If you have any information in the unsolved death of Armani Dante Morgan, please contact Dallas Police at coldcase@dallaspolice.gov. Armani Morgan's family has launched a rally starter to urge the Dallas Police Department to test critical evidence in his case. With just one click, you can send a pre-written email directly to investigators asking them to take this essential step. Testing the evidence could lead to Armani's manner of death being changed from undetermined to homicide. A shift that would not only move the investigation forward, but also unlock additional resources and support for his grieving family. You can find a link to the rally starter in our show notes and on our social media posts for this episode. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. Our therapy fund is paid for through Patreon and Apple Premium subscriptions. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show on your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is out everywhere now. Find out more through the link in our show notes. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laurah Norton, with additional research assistance by Melissa Gold. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Engineered and scored by Southern Gothic Media and Mark Curry. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.